has made it seem so easy. Blockbuster game making at its smartest and most essential. Or VG247, a very serious publication that I really enjoy most of their work. They said, taken as a single-player experience, Deathloop feels complete and incredibly well-rounded. The extra injection of optional multiplayer action is a fabulous cherry on top. Basically, Deathloop is everything I wanted it to be. It's confident both as a successor to many of the ideas of Dishonored, while also expressly its own thing. With a tone and sense of style I absolutely adore. It's one of my favorite games of the year, and one we'll surely be talking about for months to come. I mean, props to them, they said months instead of years, because nobody's talking about this game anymore. IGN, 10 out of 10. NME, 10 out of 10. The Gamer, 10 out of 10. PlayStation Universe, 10 out of 10. VGC, 10 out of 10. GameSpot, 10 out of 10. Gaming Nexus, 9.5 out of 10. Like, you can't make this up. They praised and worshipped this game at launch. So many of us expected this to be basically the second coming of gaming Jesus. So how was the game when it actually came out? Well, players expected a lot, of course, because the game had been praised so aggressively by gaming media. When we got it, though, many players had complicated experiences. I, for one, ran into many problems where the game would simply crash, even in some cases with a hard crash that results in you being forced to restart your entire console in order to progress through the game. Other times, it would simply run into an issue where you couldn't progress past the menus. If you opened up your menu to handle something, you couldn't physically close the menu, so you had to back out, close the game, and lose all of the progress you had made up to that point, which in this game is a big deal, because each run of a day or a time of day is effectively one checkpoint. So if you happen to have that crash, you could lose anywhere from 10, 15, even upwards of 45 minutes of progress. Just gone, no fault of yours, no mistake of yours, just because the game wasn't refined or polished. And I've gotten heat for this before, and I really just don't know why. I do not think a game should be eligible to get a perfect score if there are widespread technical issues, especially that prevent progress. Like, I can't believe that this is a scandalous thing to say, but apparently it is. I got bashed for saying that Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart had technical issues, and I proceeded to show a ton of them on screen as I discussed it. I got bashed for saying that Horizon Forbidden West's problems with the performance mode disqualified it from a perfect score, which a lot of other people seem to agree with. And I also said that Elden Ring, while a phenomenal game in many ways, had a ton of technical issues, especially in the PC port, that would effectively disqualify it from a perfect score, at least on that platform. I don't see how that's scandalous. If you're going to give something the best possible score, it seems like the bar, the standard should be that the game runs as well as you could reasonably expect it to run. Whew, I need to cool down after that. I got heated. Okay. Going zen. So that alone, I think, should disqualify Deathloop from a perfect score. The fact that there were so many technical issues that most players experienced once the game came out for the broad general public. Now, is it possible that most gaming journalists didn't encounter any sort of technical issues? Sure, maybe. And if a gaming journalist doesn't run into a bug, it's unfair for us to criticize them for not encountering that bug just by a matter of happenstance. So let's give them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they didn't run into any of those problems. Cool. What we do know is that the game still has tons of issues. For one, the AI at launch was freakishly stupid. This is even mentioned in a few of the reviews that we went through during the course of the opening of this video. Some of those people mentioned that the AI wasn't as smart as it was back in the Dishonored days, which implies a downgrade, which I would say is probably not perfect game material. And furthermore, if people are going to argue that the game didn't actually have major AI issues, I would ask the question, okay, well then why was it one of their main priorities in post-launch patches? The first 3 to 5 patches for the game that they released on all platforms, the primary goal was to improve the enemy AI. And if you're improving something, it means that at some point it wasn't as good, which means it was worse, which means it was bad, which means that if the developers felt it was in need of improvement after launch, it wasn't where they thought it should be at launch, which again doesn't bode well for it. There are also a plethora of other issues, such as the lack of replayability, the fact that once you get through the main campaign of the game, there really is not much reason to go through it again, unlike the Dishonored games, which are replayable ad nauseum. Like, seriously, Dishonored, one of the most replayable games you could possibly craft. It's truly tremendous and an absolute triumph of game design. But this time, these guys failed utterly to do it, and instead they created levels which are pretty fun to play at first that you are forced to go through during the repeated daytime cycle as the time loop continues to rage its vicious cycle, and eventually you will just end up going through the same exact path through each level. So it's not like you're actually trying different things like in the Dishonored games. You're just doing the same thing over and over and over and over and over again until you happen to solve the puzzle by following all of the quest objectives that the game gives you. There's nothing wrong with a time loop game that can be truly breathtakingly amazing. I've said it before, I'll say it again. One of the most underrated games from last year was The Forgotten City. Here's the trailer of it, little footage of it. It won my Indie Game of the Year last year. It is truly remarkable. It almost took my Game of the Year full stop because it's so freakishly good. It's basically made by 3 people. 80% of the work was apparently done by one guy. It's truly, truly remarkable. I won't get into it here, but if you like time loop games, if you like stories that you have to actually unravel and figure out, play this game. Deathloop won't do it. Deathloop holds your hand the entire time, but The Forgotten City will blow your mind. I'm not joking. I do this for a living. I critique games. It's really that good. Trust me. Trust me. Do you trust me? Trust me. It's really good. But what's the point of all of this? Well, over the last year or two, we've seen a growing discrepancy between games journalism and gamers themselves. I wanted to find out if there actually was a discrepancy, because when you look at most of the big review sites and you look into their replies on Twitter or the comment section in the YouTube review that's posted, you will usually see the crap and most skeptical people float to the top. It's just what happens. It's the internet. I mean, what did you expect? But I wanted to know for a fact what actually happened in these cases. So I did a survey on my channel in the community tab where I asked you guys what you thought of the game. And I got over 30,000 responses. I know I said earlier 20,000. I hadn't checked it in a day and a half. It's up to 30,000. Thank you guys for participating. I appreciate it. The results are pretty definitive. We have, out of 30,000 responses, only 4% of people saying that, yeah, the game deserved a perfect score. Of the rest, 67% said no, it's not a 10 out of 10. 25% said they didn't have a firm opinion either way, likely because they haven't played the game. And then 5% of people said that they had an other opinion, which they commented on, which feel free to read through the comments on that community post in the community tab on my channel. There's a lot of really interesting thoughts that you guys put out there.
Hej, jestem Aga Borysiuk i witam Was serdecznie w kolejnym odcinku z serii Poznaj nasz sprzęt, w której to serii na ostro testujemy produkty marki Monster. Ostatnio testowaliśmy słuchafony i stojak. Tu gdzieś powinniście mieć link na drukcie, koniecznie, jeśli go nie oglądaliście. Dzisiaj testujemy tego oto mechanika GK900 Autumn Brown. Zacznijmy od tego, że całość obudowy jest aluminiowa, co sprawia, że klawiatura jest bardzo wytrzymała, na przykład na uderzenia pięści. Klawiaturę zasila mający 180 cm przewód w oplocie zakończony pozłacanym złączem USB. Sprzęt ma anti-ghosting oraz N-key rollover, co po polsku znaczy tyle, że klawiatura potrafi zarejestrować nielimitowaną liczbę klawiszy jednocześnie. Klawiatura jest oczywiście podświetlana na aż 16 milionów kolorów oraz posiada kilka trybów podświetlenia, o czym więcej za chwilę. Mechanik wyposażony jest w przełączniki Autumn Brown, czyli przełączniki najbardziej uniwersalne. Wydają one specyficzny klikany dźwięk. Posłuchajcie zresztą sami. Klawiatura występuje także w wersjach z przełącznikami Red i Blue. Zerknijmy na chwilę do oprogramowania. Nasz sprzęt jest obsługiwany przez aplikację Madbook, w której możemy sobie zmienić praktycznie wszystko. Rodzaje podświetlenia, kolory, bo tam dużo jest kolorów, 16 milionów, także jest w czym wybierać. Prędkość, rodzaje, może to falować, może to być w zasadzie po prostu zaraz Wam pokażę, jak to może wyglądać. O, to jest mój faworyt. Ha! My sobie klikamy, a światełko idzie za nami. Hops i hops i hops. Ideolo. Fala. Meksykańska. Dokładnie. Mistrzostwa świata nadchodzą, więc będziemy robić meksykańską falę. Niemniej, nie musimy korzystać z aplikacji, żeby zmieniać tryby. Możemy to zrobić za pomocą klawiszy. Teoria teorią, ale przejdźmy do praktyki. Pogramy, a jak gramy, to i zdarzają się takie sytuacje, kiedy przez przypadek klikniemy klawisz Windows. Ale w tej klawiaturze możemy go zablokować i już nic nas nie zaskoczy. No chyba, że my sami. Oczywiście poza graniem, bo nie samym graniem niestety człowiek żyje. Zaraz jeszcze zobaczymy, jak sprawuje się pisanie. Na przykład. O, walka w stójce, to lubię. Tylko dlaczego jestem lecznikiem? Medykiem, nie lecznikiem. A teraz coś dla fanów ASMR.
Most of the thoughts are that it didn't deserve a 10 out of 10, and there might have been some mitigating circumstances, but for the most part, it didn't deserve it. So I would add most of that 5% into that 67 to indicate that it's not a 10 out of 10 experience. And it hasn't just been Deathloop. Other huge games have had this same problem, whether we look at The Last of Us Part 2, games like Inside or Limbo or Journey, games that journalists loved, but that the broader gaming community had major issues with. Now, I have to mention it because whenever I talk about Deathloop, it gets brought up. Some people were saying, well, it was just sort of social warrior credits that were given to the game because they had people of color in the lead roles. And as a result, they gave it a perfect score as like a nod for diversity. I don't think that's what's going on here at all. I think it's just that they gave the game to a bunch of Arcane fanboys and girls to review, and because they love Arcane stuff, they happen to love it, and that kind of blinded them to the problems. I don't think it was any sort of like being woke, go broke type of situation. I just want to clear that out. I don't actually think that's what it was. I think the answer is much simpler. It's just fanboys and girls being fanboys and girls. And whenever these games are reviewed by these huge journalistic companies like IGN, GameSpot, Video Games Chronicle, all of those guys, usually it just turns into an echo chamber where the fans of this particular franchise or type of game are all talking to each other, and they hype themselves up on the game and they give it a score that it doesn't really deserve if you're looking at it super critically and objectively without any preconceptions or biases going in. And like I've said before, this is one of the problems with game reviewers being assigned in the way that they are. If you're going to have your company review Deathloop, for example, it only makes sense that you assign fans of Arcane games to review it. Like, why would you assign somebody who only plays Nintendo games and specializes in Mario Kart to review Deathloop? It wouldn't make sense. So you put the people that are already familiar with and therefore fans of this type of game, which already skews the score more positively than it would be for your average consumer. In the same way that From Software games like Elden Ring, Sekiro, Shadows Die Twice, or Dark Souls 3, those games will be reviewed by the members of that community, by the diehard fans of those franchises and those types of games, which will, in fact, skew the score higher, especially when it comes to games put out by these huge studios which have a really good reputation for great games. And I really don't know how this is fixed, or even if it necessarily should be fixed. I'd be interested in hearing what you guys have to say in the comment section below the like button, because I would like these reviewers to be more critical when they review a game. I would have liked to have known about all the major technical issues and balance problems, dumb AI and things in Deathloop before buying it, spending my money on it, and playing it. I would have liked to have been warned about that stuff, but because the fanboys and girls that reviewed it didn't see those issues or didn't feel like they were worthy of being mentioned because the rest of the game was a masterpiece, I don't know, and it doesn't really matter. I think they should still be brought up, and the reviewers should be able to look at things critically. But at the same time, I don't think that you should just assign reviewers randomly to different games, because then you'll end up in situations where you'll get another review of Elden Ring where they complain that it's too hard, or somebody tries to play Cuphead and can't get past the tutorial section. And I don't think anybody wants that, because then those reviews basically have no worth or merit whatsoever. I don't know. If you have an idea for a solution on how to fix the problem of fanboys giving inflated scores to games that they're fanboys of, I would love to hear it. I haven't come up with anything, so I'm just here complaining. I actually do have one idea of how to fix it, and that is to subscribe to independent game reviewers and critics like myself. Ring the bell notification so you get notified of when I post reviews and critiques. That really does help get those reviews seen, because at the end of the day, I can't get review codes for games to review them on launch day unless you guys are engaged, unless the publisher thinks that it's going to be seen by a lot of people. So the more you guys engage with this content, the more you guys engage with my videos and my uploads, the more likely we are to get those review codes. So if you would sub, like the video, I'd really appreciate it. But that's it from me. Make sure to hit the like button. Follow me over on Twitch. We're probably live at the very moment that this video is going up. So if you happen to pop on over, say hi. I would love to see you. And I'll tell you, it's an easy way to get brownie points to pop into chat and be like, hey, I just watched your Deathloop video. And you'll go, okay, this guy, this is the one. This is the one to pay attention to. But that's it from me. Lachlan is stirring a little bit in his crib, so I'm going to go grab the little fella. Thank you for watching. I love you all more than you can possibly know. I really do appreciate you guys. Don't ever forget it. See you in the next one. Hugs and kisses. Bye-bye.
Podążaj za smakiem i podejmij wyzwanie smaku Pepsi.
Hi guys, it's me. I'd like to talk about our favorite game, Diablo Immortal. I started playing on release. I've been level 60 now for a few days. I've gotten some of the Paragon levels, and I've spent a couple
Hello everyone, my name is Luke. Thank you for dropping by. Spoiler warning, this video isn't going to be particularly thrilling or exciting. I'm basically just saying thank you. We just hit 250,000 subs, which is absolutely insane to me. I can't believe it. Just a few weeks ago, I looked at the counter and it was at like 242,000, I think it was. And I was like, okay, well, we need to start planning for 250,000. But we got some time, so when it gets closer, we'll plan something elaborate like a meetup, or maybe we'll like go and rent a movie theater, and anybody in Colorado or surrounding states can like come and we'll watch a movie together or something. But out of nowhere, we hit the target, which is good. I mean, it's good that it happened sooner than I expected, because we've had some very successful videos recently. I reworked the thumbnail style for the most recent uploads, like the 4 or 5 most recent uploads, actually inspired by some true crime channels that I follow. If you don't know, and if you don't follow me on Twitch, you should, by the way, you might not know that I'm actually really into true crime. I love that stuff. I find it really interesting. And I follow a bunch of channels in that space, and I noticed that a lot of them have a lot of success with just simply putting a picture and then some simple text. Nothing flashy, no crazy like warped text with photoshopped big eyes and, you know, huge expressions. Just keep it simple and respectful to the audience. Make it clear and concise, and people will watch it if they're interested. And we've had a ton of success. Our click-through rate tripled in the last 3 videos that we've done. So we've had a ton of success, a ton of new subscribers as a result. If you're new here, hi, welcome. I'm glad to have you. And hopefully it's a sign of things to come. Hopefully that keeps up, because if it does, we can just keep ratcheting up the quality. We can expand into some other ventures I've wanted to pursue. But, you know, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it, I suppose. I wanted to take this moment to just kind of look back and appreciate how far we've come, because we weren't always in a really nice studio space with nice lights and cameras and stuff. We started this YouTube journey literally in my mom's basement. Like, literally in my mom's basement. And I was recording videos on my little MacBook Pro that I had saved up for years with money I made from chess tournament winnings and from tutoring like other elementary school and junior high kids from around the world in chess. I would hop on a Skype call, and then I would charge like $15 an hour to teach kids, and there were some adults I taught as well, chess, because I was pretty good at it, and I used to play competitively back in the day before I was introduced to girls, basically. So I did that. I got the MacBook Pro, and I started getting into video games around like kind of early to mid high school. Before that, I was in a pretty sheltered household, and we weren't really allowed to play video games. We had like a Wii from 2006 and like a PlayStation 2, but that was it. And even then, we only had a couple of games lying around to play on those. So we didn't play video games. And I was introduced to that world of video games around 2014, maybe into 2015. I really started getting into them.
Akademia Osteopatii jako jedyna w Polsce funkcjonuje w 5 miastach, co sprawia, że wykładowcy, którzy kształcą, tak naprawdę w każdym mieście są ci sami. Jednocześnie słuchacze Akademii mają duże udogodnienie z tego tytułu, że po pierwsze mogą wybrać miasto, w jakim chcą się kształcić z różnych powodów, albo ze względu na to, że ono jest bliżej ich.
And it was a whole new world. Like, there's no other way to describe it. It was like I discovered some secret like wardrobe into Narnia, and I had this whole new universe to explore, and I fell in love with it, and I wanted to start talking about it. So I started making videos about video games as well, and you know, they started with cringe like hype videos around Fallout 4, just speculating. You know, I saw in this freeze frame from this trailer that they showed, I remember one video in here, they showed gas prices on the Red Rocket gas station location. And I said, so what if they have gas for sale in the game, and then they'll have cars in Fallout 4, and you can get a car, go and refuel, and then drive it around the map. That would be incredible. And that was the whole video. That was the whole premise. That I saw some numbers on a gas station and something. Like, that was the whole thing. So hopefully you are appreciative of how much I've grown as a creator, and that I'm not still doing that stuff. I look back and I can appreciate it. They were good times, but I'm also like, oh, it's cringe. It's so cringe. But I think that's part of the journey. Like, I get asked so frequently on Twitter DMs, emails direct to me, over on our Discord, all of which links below. And people will reach out and ask if I have advice for them when it comes to making YouTube content or streaming or whatever it may be. And the one thing I always try to just put forward is, like, don't expect your first 200 videos to be something that you'll look back on in 10 years and be like, wow, that was fun. I really nailed that. If you expect that, then you're not going to go into it with the hunger to grow and learn. You have to go into it realizing, like, it's not perfect, but this is the best I can do right now, and I'm going to keep growing and learning. And that's what we've done. I mean, I look back at some of those early critiques we did back in like 2017, and there's tons of stuff I would change. tons of stuff I would change. I look back at stuff we put out even in 2020, and I'm like, oh yeah, what was I thinking with that? I should have redone it this way. And you're always growing and learning, and I think that hunger for perfection is good because it forces you to keep growing, but be warned, like when you have that hunger, and some of you probably know what this is like I can't be satisfied really with anything. Like even our studio space, like in the last video, the lighting was different and things were like, I'm always changing stuff because I can never really be happy or be complacent. And it's a blessing and a curse because on the one hand it's good, it keeps things changing and makes it so I never get complacent. I never just sit back and rest on my laurels. But it's also a curse because it means I can never actually be satisfied with where I am or what I'm doing, which is really frustrating. I mean, I look at friends and family who are working, pretty straightforward, maybe blue-collar jobs, and, they've got their wife, their kids, and they have a little house that they stay in, and they are totally content to work that job for 40 years, retire with a nice pension or with their IRA and cash out, and that's it. That's the whole gig. And for some people that sounds beautifully peaceful. It sounds like the American dream. But for me, like that sounds, and no diss on them, but to me that just sounds almost like it actually kind of makes me have feelings of like fear, and I wouldn't say disdain, but it's almost like I'm terrified of being satisfied like that, which is weird because I can also look at it and be like, I think I would be a lot happier if I could just do that and be happy about it and be satisfied, or just be like, wow, we're here right now, I'm satisfied, or look at what I can do now, I'm satisfied, but I can't do it. And it's weird. Maybe I need therapy or something. But, for now, I think it's a useful curse because it's forcing me to constantly chase the next thing, try to figure out what the next big successful venture is going to be. We try a lot of things, a lot of them fail, but a few of them are successful, and those are the ones we chase. And it's only natural. And it reminds me of a story which a friend of mine actually reminded me of. I met this guy, I don't think he'll mind me using his name. I met this guy, Corey, when I was, I think a junior in college, a handful of years ago, 3-4 years ago. And I met him because we were moving into a college house together. He knew this guy that I knew, so he was like the third in our little group, or the fourth in our group, moving into this house. So I didn't know him, but we both knew the same connecting person, right? And when I met him, we started talking and filling in each other on, what we did for work and hobbies and what we were studying and all of this. And at the time, I forgot this, and he reminded me of it recently. At the time, I told him that I had a YouTube channel, and I wasn't doing it full time because I couldn't afford it. It wasn't generating anywhere near enough money. At the time, it was probably like $300-400 a month or something. But I had about 60,000 subs, and he asked me, like, when will you be satisfied? Like, when will you be like, yeah, I've done this. I did the YouTube thing. I'm good. Like now, I'm happy. I'm satisfied. I can just ride it out. I can keep doing it the same way. I'm good. And apparently, I told him at the time, like 80,000 subs, I'll be satisfied. And if not, then when I hit 100,000, I surely will be like, I'll get the silver play button, which right there, and I'll get the silver play button with my name inscribed on it, and I'll be satisfied. I'll be good. And then we pass 80,000 subs, and we pass 100,000 subs, and he asks me the same question, and I say 150,000. I think I'll be really good. You hit 150,000. Yeah, I think 200,000. That's a really solid number, and I think at that point, I've done it. Maybe I'll move on to a big boy job, right? I will have done it. I hit that. And now we're at 250,000 of you guys out there, which is still mind-boggling. And even now, I can appreciate it, and I can realize just how mind-bendingly huge that number is, just how many people are out there that have slowly been, tagging along to this journey and wanting to see more of my weird creations. And I can appreciate that.
Magne B6 zmęczenie i stres. Powiedz nie stresowi. Dzięki połączonej mocy magnezu i ashwagandy, rośliny wzmacniającej odporność na stres. Magne B6 zmęczenie i stres. Szukaj w aptekach stacjonarnych i online.
Właśnie tak smakuje świat. Ruszaj na kulinarną wyprawę do Litwy i spróbuj smaków inspirowanych Azją. Mleczko kokosowe 3+1 gratis. Sosy w stylu azjatyckim już od 2,99, a krewetki drugi produkt 58% taniej. Tak smakuje świat. Sprawdź najnowszy katalog z przepisami na www.lidl.pl.
But even now, I'm like, yeah, 500,000. That's the target. And I'm sure when I hit 500,000, I'm going to be like, well, it's not a million. And then we'll hit a million, and I'm going to be like, I mean, I really want that, whatever it is, diamond play button. So let's get to 10 million. And it's just going to keep going like that, It's just how these things work. So I'm sure I need to get better about that, because I don't think you can live a satisfied life if you are incapable of ever just being like, I'm good. Maybe one day I'll get to that point and I can say, I'm good. But as of right now, I just want to keep chasing it, which is why I'm just so thankful that there are so many of you guys out there who put up with me and are willing to support me, watch my stuff, tune into the live streams, throw donations in those streams, even though you never feel the obligation to. The YouTube channel is doing just fine. So I'm just saying, in general terms, support. The fact there's so many of you guys out there willing to do that is very, very comforting, and I'm humbled by it. I don't know how else to put it. I'm very humbled by it. Even now, like, I had somebody reach out to me recently, and they just said, like, hey, I used to work with you at Magnolia Home Theater back in, that would have been 2017, 18, maybe something like that. And he's like, I remember when you left that company and you left to pursue YouTube stuff full time, and now I see, like, you've done it, and you have a successful channel, and you're doing it as a full-time job, and you're doing well. It makes me feel happy, and it makes me feel like I could chase my own dreams. And I would encourage all of you, if you have that one thing you've been looking to try and to do, give it a shot. Like, just do it. We all make fun of that Shia LaBeouf meme. Like, just do it. Make your dreams come true. Yesterday, you said today. So just do it. Like, we make fun of that. I remember when I first saw that, I actually, like, everybody around me was laughing and giggling, and I wasn't. I was like, no, he's right. Like, he's right. I don't know what to tell you. Like, he was right. Back in the old days, like back in 2015, I would put clips of Shia LaBeouf yelling, just do it, into the end card of my videos as like a self-motivator to myself to keep making content, to keep doing it. Because it's true. Like, if you want to be a YouTuber, you have to create YouTube content. If you want to be a streamer, you gotta stream. If you want to be an artist, you gotta create art. Like, creators create. And if you want to be a creator, you have to create. It's very simple, but I cannot tell you how often people reach out to me for that aforementioned advice, and they aren't making stuff. They aren't creating, and yet their dream is to be a creator. If you want to make your dreams come true, you just got to go start doing it, and then work at it. Be humble, understand your shortcomings, try to improve them, learn from your mistakes, grow and grow and grow and grow, And if you're on that grind, eventually you will find success. It might take you a month, it might take you a year, it might take you 5 years, it might take you a decade. You just never know. But if you want to be successful, if you want to create. It's shockingly straightforward. It is. It's so simple, it'll go over your head, and it goes over a lot of people's heads, because I cannot tell you how often people say, I want to do X, Y, and Z, and they just never do it. Well, next year I'm going to do it when I have the free time, or next year I'm going to do it when I save up some more money, or I want to stream but my computer's too slow, and I want to make YouTube videos but my microphone's bad. There's always a million reasons not to do something. Just do it. Make your dreams come true. Because yesterday, you said tomorrow. So just do it. That's my word of wisdom, ripped off from Shia LaBeouf. But I'm going to leave it there. I just wanted to record this short video, say thank you to all of you guys out there who have helped make this a reality. I truly don't feel like I deserve you guys. And the outpouring of support and love that we just constantly get is truly humbling. I don't understand it, but I appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to seeing how this all changes and how we grow and expand over the years to come. I have some plans in the works for improvements and reworkings for this summer. For one, we plan to stream a lot more over on Twitch. For those of you asking about potentially expanding and doing streaming on YouTube, I've had talks with YouTube Gaming. As of right now, I'm not sure if it's the best fit for us, but I'm always open to discussing it further with them. But we're going to keep streaming. We're going to stream a lot more. We are going to be pumping out a ton of critiques. I have a dedicated editor just for critiques now, in addition to assistance from Zygo Media, the same company that does all of the editing for Tim the Tap Man. They are working on my weekly content, and then that frees up time for me to do big video essays that I like, in addition to also working on the critiques, much more focused. And I think it's going to strike a good balance, and I think we're going to be able to pump out a ton of content while maintaining the highest qualitative standards. So I'm really excited to see what all of this looks like over the coming months. But I think it's going to be good. I'm really excited about it. But with that, thank you for watching. I love all of you more than you possibly know. Let me know how long you've been watching in the comment section below. I'm actually really interested to see how many OGs are there. And if you're not an OG, that's okay. If you popped in like on a video I made last year, let me know. I find that so interesting and so cool when people pop in and say like, oh, I saw your thing from back then in this kind of obscure video, and that's how I found you. I find that stuff really, really interesting. So let me know. But I'll leave it there. I'll stop rambling. I love you all. See you in the next video. Hugs and kisses. Bye-bye.
Ojcowie są twardzi, są ekspertami w każdej dziedzinie. Zawsze zdecydowani, nigdy nie płaczą.
Mafia 3. It's a game that got a ton of hate at launch, and for good reason. It was basically a steaming pile of garbage. Seriously, this game was so broken, so full of bugs, it was basically unplayable for around 80% of the player base. And for those who did get to play the game, they didn't exactly love it. The game didn't get great reviews, partially because it was so buggy and broken, and partially because reviewers thought that it leaned way too heavily into repetitious content instead of things that made the original Mafia games so unique and incredible. Specifically, the overwhelming focus on the story and narrative not necessarily trying to make it into a GTA spin-off. Now, I was one of these people. I didn't get to play Mafia 3 at launch, and I regularly would try to play Mafia 3 every month or so for the last few years because I still couldn't play it. That's right, like even up until just a couple of months ago, every time I tried to boot up Mafia 3, it would crash during the opening sequence when you're loading money into the back of a truck. I literally couldn't play the game, even if I wanted to. But, like a month and a half ago, I decided to try it one more time. And it didn't work. But I tried again a couple of weeks later and it did. The point is, I was able to play it. So I started going through it and we played it a bunch over on the Twitch stream. By the way, you should follow me over there. I'm probably live at the very moment I'm filming this video. So pop over, say hi, links in the link tree in the description box underneath the like button. And I gotta be honest, I really think that this game got a bad rap, and I'm going to show you why. But to do that, we got to actually play the game and try it. We're going to give the game a fair chance and see if it deserved all the hate that it got. So let's give it a shot. Okay, so we're going to be playing on Steam using the PC version of the game. The console version is still a little finicky, and I've had some problems with it. Again, even now, like, what, 6 years after the game's launch? But the PC version is functioning, and that's what we're going to try today. So, for those of you not aware, the game is set in 1968 in New Bordeaux. It's basically New Orleans, but in a fictionalized universe, yet it's still in Louisiana. So it's just like the original Mafia games where it's like, it's real and it's set in a real place, but it's not at the same time. It basically just gives them a reason to mess with some of the layout of the city, with some of the lore and the people that are involved in the city and government and everything, while still basically setting it in a real place. So one thing I do have to warn you about this game is that it's set in 1968 Louisiana. Like, this is at the height of some craziness, shall we say. I'm trying to be ad friendly. Surrounding segregation, surrounding Jim Crow. Like, it was a rough time. So as a result of the historical setting, they tried to be very real and grounded with it, respectful of the actual history of the area and what people of color went through during that time in that place. So there are segregated businesses in the game. If you, as Lincoln Clay, walk into a business that has a sign on it that says whites only, you will get kicked out of that business. Like, it's pretty hardcore. You will also have police stopping you in white neighborhoods for walking around after dark. You'll have people using, let's say, racial terms that perhaps Paula Dean knows about, but that are not acceptable in open conversation. So it goes hard. So if you're sensitive to that type of thing, as I think you probably should be, but more specifically, if you just don't want to hear that or engage with it, even in the like context of a narrative set in a historical setting, just be aware that this game does show you that stuff in full force. They don't sugarcoat it, and they let you know and see what it was like to live in this area as somebody like Lincoln Clay, and it wasn't particularly great. Now let's take a moment and break down exactly how this game works. Let's park gently while we do this. So the first thing to understand about Mafia is that it is primarily a narrative experience. As a franchise, Mafia 1, Mafia 2 are narrative games. That's what they do really well, and that's what they focus on. And in the past, that's been pretty much all they focus on. They have open worlds. For example, Mafia 1 Definitive Edition, you might have played that when they released that remake recently, or Mafia 2 from back in the day. Those games had open worlds that were pretty well put together, but they didn't really try to make those open worlds living and breathing, filled with all sorts of side activities that you could complete just for the fun of it. The world was basically just an arena that you would be driven through as you traversed the story. And that's about it. If you ever took time to just drive around the city, you would probably notice pretty quickly that the world was empty, bland, boring. There wasn't much there. Now in Mafia 3, they tried to go the opposite route and put a lot more effort into the open world. So they spent a ton of time designing it so that it is heavily, let's say, inspired by New Orleans. Even the layout of the city looks very, very similar to New Orleans. I actually just went there this past summer, so I'm all too familiar with this place, at least insofar as a tourist can be. And I gotta say, they did a pretty bang-up job with financial districts, with the French Quarter, with the plantation areas along the river. Like, they did a pretty good job of recreating it. I don't know exactly what it was like in 1968, but apparently it wasn't too different from what it is today, because today it does look and feel a lot like this. But what they wanted to do was encourage players to explore and traverse this open world because they put so much effort into building it. So what they did is they created these stops. You'll see them on the mini-map right there. We're going to go in and deal with it. What these are telephone boxes, juncture boxes, that you have to hack into, which unlocks activities in the open world that you have to complete in order to progress through the story. While I run there, I'm just going to go past this building. You'll notice this as you explore the world of New Bordeaux. There's a ton of buildings where just casual jazz bands are playing and practicing, and you can hear them if you stand outside. Kind of fun. And here we are at the juncture box. So what we do is we break into these with a little mini game, like a basic lock-picking thing. The closer you get to that first one means the bigger the range is to hit it on the rebound on the second one. You open up the box, you use parts that you've collected out in the world, electronic parts. You see I just used 3, and that allows us to wiretap that node. And what that does is it opens up points of interest in this particular district. And after the opening 8 to 10 hours of the game, all you will be doing is traveling around these districts, clearing out these special activities after you've opened up these junction boxes so that you can get new activities. And then you'll unlock the district boss, you'll kill them, and then move on to the next district. And that goes on for about 15 hours of gameplay, repeatedly, without much story content in the middle. Now, as you clear different districts, you'll also unlock all sorts of different abilities and perks from your associates, which you'll have 3 of. I won't name them because I guess one of them is potentially a spoiler, but you get 3 different ones. Some of them can allow you to stash your dough in your safe back at your base, which means that if you die, it can't be taken. It's basically in a secured account, which is nice. The operator, which allows you to cut phone lines, so people who notice in the area you committing a crime or something, they can't call the cops on you for a set period of time, which is nice. This one, which allows you to pay $1,500 to call off the cops for 30 seconds, cool ability. And the hit squad, which costs $3,000 but brings in a squad of helpers to give you assistance in a given encounter. And then we have the ability to call in an arms dealer where we can buy weapons and refill our ammunition, in addition to also calling in vehicle delivery, which is what I've just done, where we can call in vehicles that we've collected previously or unlocked through various side missions or story missions. Altogether, it's not that bad, actually. As you can see, we have the standard... Okay, you did that to yourself. See, there's a witness calling the cops. I can go up here, use the marker.
Reach out. I certainly appreciate some help with phones.
Boom. And then they cut the phone line, so for 2 minutes nobody can call the cops.
Odkryj inteligentne oświetlenie Philips Hue i korzystaj z niego przez cały dzień. Stwórz wyjątkowy nastrój na zewnątrz i rozświetl swój ogród na każdą okazję. Smart Home zaczyna się od światła. Philips Hue.
Meaning I can just get away with what I just did, which was accidentally run over a woman who drove in front of my car. We also have this ability, which I'm going to be real, I can't see it as anything other than Franklin's driving ability from Grand Theft Auto 5. It basically just lets you slow down and make quick turns without skidding off the road. I mean, what else am I supposed to make of this? It is Franklin's ability, let's be honest. The other thing you'll notice about that ability is that it makes the vibrance increase drastically. That's because the entire game has this filter put over it, which allegedly was put in place to make it look much more 60s and vintage. So they muted all of the colors I really hate it. I think it looks so bad. Like, I pop this ability, look at the colors pop. The world is so much more vibrant and vivid and interesting. I love that world way more than this bland dark one that we get in the finished version of the game. It looks bad. I don't like it. I mean, it's another example, right, of art style versus like narrative inspiration for the art style, and that just because you can make a change or an artistic choice doesn't mean that it's actually going to improve the quality of the experience. For something like The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, we can point to that as an artistic choice for that art style, where it actually enabled the developers over at Nintendo to go bigger and badder and bolder with their design, because they could save on rendering basically requirements and expenses by limiting the texture quality, the color quality, all of those things, because they kept it within that very limited art style. In this case, limiting and muting the colors, I don't think serves any purpose whatsoever for the game, other than just looking worse than if they turned it off, which isn't a good thing. We can also break billboards. I stand corrected. I should say we can break billboards if we happen to drive through the billboard section itself, then they break apart. I just assumed I could drive into the base and it would break apart. Apparently that's not the case. Can I help you? So yeah, you can't break billboards like that. But if you go off a ramp and drive into it, then you can. So here I can call in another car. Let's call in an exotic. Let's do this. See, like this ramp. We can break this billboard. Let's do that. Let's do it! See, I wasn't lying. You can break them, okay? You just got to go off a ramp. See, it works. It does work. Also, by God, the music in this game is tremendous. Like, they spent a freaking fortune licensing all this music. They have Elvis Presley, they have the Platters, they have pretty much every big name band of this time period in this game. It's tremendous. I think they've removed most of the Elvis music actually since launch, because I think after 5 years they lost the licensing to it. So that's a bit of a bummer. But they still have some amazing music in this, and it scratches the same itch that a lot of Grand Theft Auto games scratch, where driving around and just listening to music feels like a gameplay system in and of itself, and like something that's worth doing just to enjoy it. It's really that good. So the struggle that games like Mafia 3 have always had is that players and critics alike will always compare it to the best open world exploration games that have ever been released. Specifically the likes of like Grand Theft Auto. And as a result of that, if you give players similar abilities to what they had in Grand Theft Auto, players and reviewers will just start to question whether or not you can keep up with that game, which is at this point 9, almost going on 10 years old. And the problem with Mafia 3 is that it's just not able to do all of that stuff that GTA 5 did so freakishly well back in the day. Granted, this game released about 3 years after Grand Theft Auto 5 did, but even so, people are going to hold it to that standard, and it just doesn't hold up. Let's drive on some buildings. Little sports camera action. Love it. Drive off that ramp. See, like we're having fun. Oh, I broke the donut. See, oh, okay, we're having a good time. We're having a good time. I almost killed myself doing it, but we had a good time. And you've probably noticed as we've driven around the map in these first few minutes that they put a lot of effort into recreating a lot of these iconic buildings from the area. They recreated interiors. They've got all sorts of stuff built out that looks really, really good. The difference is that it's all still kind of just hollow. The NPCs aren't particularly smart. There's not a lot of world activities to partake in. Sure, we can drive around, we can do all sorts of stuff to entertain ourselves in that capacity, but eventually it just kind of gets old. I mean, I love driving through fruit crates and stuff, but eventually it gets repetitive. Now, one thing Mafia 3 does really, really well is it accurately portrays, as I mentioned before, the time period that this game is set within. And that means it can be hard to play at times, especially because you will run into, during the course of the story, some very, very racist, vulgar, and let's say problematic people that will be unsettling for most people. I think it's all done in a reasonably historical way, if that makes sense. Like, it doesn't ever feel as though the writers are just saying things for the sake of saying things, or that they're trying to engage in shock value for the sake of shock value. It all feels grounded within the characters you're dealing with. For example, in this area of the bayou in Sinclair Parish, we're dealing with a very corrupt police chief that, let's just say, has some antiquated views and is one of the most bigoted people in the entire game. And as a result, you have to be careful in this area. Because you are black, if you are caught in this area after dark, police will shoot on sight. If you go into pretty much any store, you will be ushered out and they will try to arrest you. I mean, it's pretty tough to deal with, but what's crazier is that this is actually like pretty historically accurate, which is why I think it's important for players to give the game a shot, even if this sounds, let's say, difficult to deal with or difficult to play, because it's important to understand that this is real and this stuff actually did happen. Now, one element where the game starts to struggle is in its gameplay core loop, like what you're gonna be doing. Because what we do across the entire map in all of these districts, no matter what we're doing for which district boss or which faction that we're working with, no matter what, we are going into areas like this that are kitted out with a bunch of enemies that have a bunch of guns and just want to shoot you on sight. And you can use your loadouts, whether you want to use an assault rifle, a sniper rifle, a silenced pistol, as I like to use, or one of your throwables, as you see in the bottom. Now, they introduced some stealth mechanics because Lincoln Clay here is actually a Vietnam veteran. So he has some pretty potent combat abilities, as you'll see there. And they actually introduced a system for specialized gruesome takedowns where he does particularly aggressive things with a knife. It's a good touch because he is a Vietnam veteran. I'm sure he did much worse stuff over there, but still, like, ooh, some of these finishers are hardcore. Now, one of the things somebody pointed out on Twitch that I cannot unsee, and you will not be able to unsee it either once I point this out, is that even now, about 6 years after the game's launch, they never fixed something as obvious as the placement of a silencer on a pistol. Look at the pistol in his hand. You see that dead space, that gap in between it? The silencer is backwards. Like, that's the screw on the bottom. He's supposed to screw it into the barrel and lock it in place. They didn't even fix that. That tells you how much post-game support this thing got. It really was abandoned, which is unfortunate. It just seems like they put it out, it didn't sell well. But yeah, I mean, it is just really too bad that the game did not get much love from the developers after it was released. I mean, they pretty much put it out and then just left it like it was. There were a few patches that came here and there, specifically to make the game run DLC that they launched after the fact. But like I said at the top, a lot of the console versions are still broken. Like, they just don't work. Mafia 3 is available on Xbox Series X, for example, through backwards compatibility. It runs the Xbox One version of the game. And it doesn't run very well at all. So it's just a real bummer that they didn't get the support they needed. And yeah, this is a really clear example. You can see the huge gap between the gun and the silencer. It's flipped the wrong way and they didn't screw it in properly. You can't make this stuff up. It's amazing. This game has been out 6 years and they didn't fix even that. So yeah, this is what you're gonna be doing for like 20 hours of gameplay. It'll probably get a little old, it'll get a little dry. If you really enjoy the setting and exploring 1960s Louisiana, then it will probably be worth it and you'll be able to put up with the repetition. But if you don't have a high tolerance for that repetition, it's going to drive you crazy and you probably are going to want to stop, which is what most players seem to do. Like seriously, this is all we're going to be doing. We just walk, aim, pop, aim, pop. Normally we would go in and call off the police dispatch, but in this particular area of the map, you can't do that because this cop is completely independent from the core group over here, so you can't actually use that ability. It's a good touch, don't get me wrong. Look at that stride. She's sprinting away. Oh my god. I really think this is an example of a game that could have benefited from an attitude of less is more. Basically, like, because they wanted to turn this into a mini Grand Theft Auto, they failed to address the issue of whether or not things should have been trimmed and cut, because they just wanted more content. So if they had just left the game where it is, like, at the end of Act 1, and then they cut Act 2 and just go straight to Act 3, I think it would have worked really, really well, and I think the game would have been received a lot better. But when you put something in your game that's not good, it's perceived as worse than if you just didn't have that bad thing at all. And that's where this game really suffered, because they put that stuff in here even when it shouldn't have been, just because they thought more was going to be better. And boom, just like that, we've escaped the junkyard, and that is that mission. That's the end of it. Done. And you're going to do that over and over and over and over again for like 15, 20 hours. At least we can enjoy the music while we drive off. Funny thing, when you use the slow-mo ability, it actually slows down the music too, so everybody sounds really weird. I love that. Then we'll go in here, talk to our associate. Right over here, he's a lawyer. What? Oh, it's a fan. It's a fan. I was like, what is on her? It's a fan. It's hot in Louisiana. Loading.
2,000 years later.
Okay, this is taking like a really uncomfortably long time to load, like aggressively long. We've been here for probably a minute and it's still going. Okay, this is ridiculous. It's been like 5 minutes. I don't know what's happening. Can I back out? No. Okay, well, you see, you can't script this stuff. I guess the game does still have its problems. You know, I can't even back out of the game without Alt F4ing. So let's huddle up in the back and see if this game loads back in by the time we're done talking.
Co? Hugh zrobił prawdziwe jedzenie, które można gryźć? Hugh mac and cheese to ekspresowy, kremowy posiłek z makaronem i sosem serowym. Przygotowanie dania zajmie kilka minut. Wystarczy wsypać mieszankę do miski, zalać wrzątkiem i wymieszać, szczelnie przykryć i odczekać 5 minut. Voila! Jeden posiłek Hugh mac and cheese zawiera 25 gramów białka, dużo błonnika, 26 witamin i minerałów i jest w 100% wegański. Super smaczny. Wejdź na hugh.com i dołącz do ponad 1 miliona Hugh-liganów.
The ambitions is always the same. The rest doesn't matter.
Everybody is under the magnifying glass.
Okay, well, sort of a successful experiment, I suppose. It's still loading. There's the little loading symbol, so it's still trying its hardest. Not hard enough, apparently. So listen, I'm kind of conflicted. I like Mafia as a franchise. I like Mafia 3 as a game in concept, though the execution certainly leaves a lot to be desired. I really think they just tried to do too much with this game. If they had just trimmed a lot more fat off of the steak, I think the steak would have been a lot better than if they just left all the steak on and claimed that it was a gamble and that you were getting good bang for your buck. Like, in this case, it's not really about how much you get for your $60 for a game, it's about the quality of what you're actually going to spend your time doing. And I think the evidence bears out that players would much rather play a phenomenal 10-hour game, or a really good one, than they would play a great 10 hours and then a terrible 10 hours after that, followed by a few more hours of really good stuff. They'd much rather a lean, mean experience than something that just feels inflated and bloated. Still loading! Almost without a doubt, if they had cut out the second act of the game and just avoided the district system where you run around doing the same thing 1,500 times, I think players would have had a much better time with the game and would have been much more forgiving of the bloated experience that they got. Because the opening sequence is really good. The opening 10 hours even are really good. Very narrative, very linear, very story heavy. Just very, very good. I really liked it. And the last portion of the game throws in some narrative curveballs that will blow your balls clear off. Like, really, really good. But the unfortunate reality is that most players are just never going to play Mafia 3. Even now, you watching this video, you've never played the game. You probably are looking at this and aren't exactly sold. Still loading. And here's the deal. In the modern games marketplace, there are so many options to choose from. You've got everything from free-to-play games like Call of Duty Warzone to Apex Legends, mixed in with premium experiences that you have to pay for upfront but can offer a ton of gameplay like Elden Ring. They all are vying for your attention and your dollar. And in order to keep up and in order to compete with those premium titles, you gotta be premium yourself or come in at a lower cost or have such a specific niche appeal that people just don't care and are willing to overlook any flaws or lack of, let's say, value that they would care. And in this case, I just think Mafia 3 missed the boat on almost every single step of the journey. Like, they missed it when it came to the quality of the title itself. They didn't actually deliver a game that was playable, which is like 101. Most players couldn't actually get through the game at launch. It was so broken. I couldn't even launch it and get through the tutorial section for like 6 years, and that's a problem. I guess it was October of 2016, so more like 5.5 years. But you get my point. But then, even if players were able to get through the game, they would launch into it, enjoy the first few hours, and then realize that it was going to be a repetitious monstrosity for about 15 to 20 hours until they got to the end game, which is what everybody was actually interested in seeing. Not the middle game, the end game. And then once the game launched and all of the numerous problems were clear for everybody to see, the developers weren't actually given the ability to fix it by the publisher. Instead, they were pushed into trying to pump out some easy DLC and then just move on to the next project. In this case, they actually were downsized heavily. The studio had massive layoffs. They were out for blood. And as for what exactly went wrong, I'm not too sure. I'm not familiar with the development of the game, but it seems as though it was a mixture of managerial misconduct and oversight, poor planning and production management. I don't think most of this lands on the game developers except for the reliance on the mid-game grind for literally no reason. Like, at least in Shadow of War, a game which had a ton of grind, there was like a justification for it. They were trying to get you to buy loot boxes. A terrible justification, but there was a reason they did it. In this game, they just have you grind for like 20 hours doing the same thing over and over and over again. Because, like, they weren't trying to sell you anything. They didn't have like XP boosters as far as I'm aware. It's just like they thought that if the game was more fun than it is. It's weird. But there's a silver lining to all of this, and that is that Mafia seems to be getting sort of a second wind, and after the overwhelming success of Mafia Definitive Edition, a game which I absolutely love. I can't even begin to describe how much I love that. But yeah, after the overwhelming success of Mafia Definitive Edition, they actually announced that they are working on the 4th game in the franchise. I guess the 5th release, if you count the Definitive Edition as a standalone standardized release. But they're making another game, and apparently this one's going to be sort of a return to form. They're returning to their roots. It's apparently going to be set in Sicily or some other Italian city, and it's going to be focused on the mob, as the first 2 games were. They're not going to try to fluff it up or get too creative with it, at least in terms of setting. They're just doubling down on what made those original Mafia games great, and that was that they told a straight-up Godfather-level story, but allowed you to experience it in the format of a video game. And that's an experience I want to have again, and it looks like we're going to get it. Knock on wood, at least, right? Like, hopefully they don't screw it up again like they did last time, but I guess we'll just have to wait and see. All told, I think Mafia 3 is probably worth giving a shot if you get it for like $5 on sale, or if you have it in your inventory on like PlayStation Plus. I know it was a PlayStation free game of the month a while back, so you might have it in your inventory, and like load out of games. What is the word? Collection, maybe? I don't know. If you got the game laying around, I'd give it a shot. If you can play it, you might stumble into something that you enjoy. And hey, if you only enjoy the first 10 hours, then you get to that grind and you just stop having fun, just stop playing it. If you already own the game, you have nothing to lose other than your time, which is why you should stop when you're not having fun anymore. But if you're having a good time, give it a shot. But honestly, I probably wouldn't pay more than like 10, 15 bucks max for this thing. Even now, it has technical issues which make it difficult to play. Though it is, I guess, playable. You play it for extended periods a day. It's still loading. But you know what? I'll leave it there. I love you all. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, hit the like button so I know that you know these, and subscribe to get notified of new content that's on the way. Also, head over to the Twitch stream. Say hi. We're probably live at the very moment that this video goes up. I'd love to see you. But that's it for me. I love you all more than you possibly know. I'll see you in the next video. Hugs and kisses. Bye-bye. Today I want to tell you about one of the craziest stories in the history of modern gaming, and I'm not exaggerating. Did you know that in 2020 there was a case where allegedly a publisher stole an entire video game from a developer and started selling it without paying profits or proceeds to the developer, and then started claiming publicly that they actually had developed it, had done everything, and owned the rights to that intellectual property? Well, that actually happened, and it's what we're talking about today. I will say there's a ton of alleged things in this case. A lot of it is just filled with question marks. We're going to try to navigate it as clearly as we can, but just understand as we go through this opening section of the video when we're describing the accusations, things may not all be what they appear to be. And I don't want to spoil it, so I'll leave it there. Make sure to like the video if you enjoy it. Make sure to subscribe as well to get notified of new content the moment that it comes out every Monday and Friday. And if you got a free minute after this video, jump over to Twitch and say hi. We're probably live at this very moment that you're watching this video, so come say hi. And I know what you're thinking. He's probably not live actually at this very moment that I'm watching this video. You never know. You might be surprised. Links in the link tree in the description box below the right button. But with that said, let's get into it and talk about this really bizarre and wacky case. Join me over at the desk. Let's go. Okay, so the first thing we need to understand about this case is that we are dealing with a game called The Sinking City. It's a Lovecraftian horror detective game that's got amazing art direction, some of the best cinematics that I've ever seen in a game. Like, this is probably one of the best cinematic trailers I've seen in the last 10 years. It's just phenomenally well put together. I got that on video. Oh my god. The wife brought me a Sprite and now I'm like, oh, I'm drenched. Look at my pant leg. Oh god, it's so sticky. Do you think she shook it up on purpose just to like mess with me? She knew I was filming and record that. If she meant for that to happen, Bravo. Brava. That was brilliant. Okay, well, back to it, I guess. So yeah, all of that aside, Sprite, spring everywhere set aside. It's a really interesting concept. It's an interesting setting. You play as like a former Navy officer who's trying to solve the mysteries of this city that's been flooded by this strangely mysterious force filled with Lovecraftian horror monsters. It's really interesting, and it's a world that I definitely want to explore and want to get to know better, especially as you like discover visions of yourself and different versions of you keep dying and cycling. It's a really interesting concept. But the actual game doesn't actually look quite like that cinematic trailer. It looks more like this. It's also available on the Nintendo Switch and a bunch of other platforms, not just PC, but the final version is sort of a clunky AA open world detective game, and that's about it. The combat is pretty terrible. There is zero hand-holding, so you're going to be stumbling around trying to figure out what you're supposed to do next a lot, because there's little to no guidance at all. But the story is what keeps it going. I mean, there's tons of different cutscenes and things that are captivating and interesting in their own right, and that will drive players to continue exploring, because the world is just interesting enough to do that. And this is something that really makes games like these shine. Like, you don't get really unique stories, worlds, and settings like this anymore in AAA games. You only see this type of thing in AA or indie titles because it's, I guess, too much of a risk for huge studios to put out games that take these risks. But I don't know. I love it. This game had a ton of potential, but we're not here to actually talk about that. We're here to talk about how the developers and the publishers got into a big spat arguing back and forth over who owned what. So you see, the game launched in 2019 in June, and it was initially received with sort of mixed reviews. It wasn't tremendously well received, had technical issues, screen tearing, and it felt pretty undercooked and underbaked. It just felt as though it was a great idea that wasn't given enough time and money to really shine. But it was successful enough that it probably would have made back its development costs, which were pretty low, and the developers would just move on to a sequel or some other project. However, pretty soon after the game's release, there started to be talks of disputes between Frogwares and the publishers, nothing really clear, at least until August of 2020, when this blog post was put out. You see, they were announcing that they were delisting the Sinking City from all major storefronts. Steam, Epic, PlayStation, Xbox, all of it. You see, what they say is in 2017, we, being Frogwares, signed the Sinking City contract as a licensing agreement with Big Ben / Nacon 2 years after the start of production. So they started in 2015 making the game, and in 2017 they signed a publishing contract, which would basically pay them up front for development costs, and then they would be able to develop the game to completion, start selling it using Nacon's help, which went by Big Ben Interactive at the time that they signed the contracts. And then once the game started making money, both the publisher and the developer would get a split of it going forward. The one big thing they wanted to note, though, is that in these agreements, they always state that Frogwares is the sole owner of the intellectual property. They don't share those rights. They own and create those games. They don't share rights to it. But you see, as development went on, they noticed that BBI / Nacon was hundreds and hundreds of days behind in payments in total, each sum due on average being 40 days late, while milestones were always on time and approved by the licensee. We had to issue formal notices multiple times so that we were able to receive the money that was owed to us. So they say here that they did receive the money owed to them, and it was just very late. They go on to say that the lack of commitment to honor the financial obligations soon turned into ongoing pressure, which I don't blame them. As somebody who pays independent contractors and employees myself, it's a lot of pressure if the money you expect to come in on, say, the 20th of the month doesn't come in until the 30th of the following month. That's a huge deal. That could lead to me having to, like, put payroll on a credit card, having to go into debt to make my business run properly. That doesn't work. That's not okay. And so for a huge company like Nacon / Big Ben Interactive to have those issues and speed bumps and to be so late on so many payments. It's certainly not cool, and is certainly in breach of pretty much every contract that I can imagine being put together. Like, I can't imagine a situation where a contract is written out that says, and this party is free to be a month and a half late on payments. Like, it's not a thing. There might be a little grace period, but usually that's highly exceptional. And for corporate deals or deals between corporations, it just doesn't happen. But they say, furthermore, once BBI/Nacon bought out a competing studio that was working on another Lovecraftian game, they, being Nacon, dictated that we, Frogwares, give them our source code for the Sinking City. Once again, they don't own the IP, they're a licensee. They sell the game, not develop and co-create it. So after they refused to comply, Frogwares refused to comply, apparently they stopped receiving financial contributions for over 4 months. So according to this representative from Frogwares, they refused to share their hard work with this random other studio that was making a game.
Życie to fascynująca przygoda. Który smak odkryje przed Tobą kolejną historię? Australijskie orzechy macadamia ze słonym karmelem. Nordyckie jagody z ciemną czekoladą. Wanilia z Jawy, migdały. Kremowe lody otulone mleczną czekoladą. Sięgnij po kolejną przygodę. Sięgnij po Nui.
Similar, because basically they wanted to just copy and paste assets and code and things that had been developed for the Sinking City into that other game to make the development move faster and to basically just cheat the whole system. And so they refused to do that, and in reaction, the publishers just stopped paying them. They just didn't send them, which is alleged. They're claiming that. That hasn't been confirmed, but if that's true, that's just like so not okay in so many ways. Like, I can't even begin to describe how messed up that is. Like, imagine if you were told by your boss, hey, I need you to do this thing that's totally not allowed and not cool at all. Like, I need you to, I don't know, lie to corporate, say that I was here working an extra week when I wasn't here and I was on vacation. I just need the extra money. So just help me. It's like, that's really, well, too bad. What? Like, that's not okay. That's not cool in any way. That's alleged, but if it's true, it's messed up. They go on to say that this kind of unacceptable behavior took on other forms as well. With regard to the business plan, we were kept in the dark. We asked on multiple occasions to see sales forecasts, but the figures sent to us were not consistent. We weren't sure of how potential sales could turn out, meaning that we were not able to properly plan our future. Were there any sales deals arranged? We were not sure. Only the exclusivity agreement with Epic Game Store gave us some respite because we knew what we would receive due to the minimum guarantees in Epic's contract. And then on June 27th of 2019, The Sinking City was released on Xbox One, PS4, and the Epic Game Store. That was a great day for us, and once the game was released, we received a letter from Big Ben/Nacon that the milestones that were previously approved were being canceled. Meaning that Frogwares would not receive any profit from the sales of the game. A retroactive cancellation on not delivering a product on time that is already out in the market. It's not acceptable. That was when our legal battle began. And then the rest of the article goes on to describe all of the really weird, bizarre stuff that started to happen once this lawsuit was filed, because it started to look like Nacon just abandoned all consideration for being coy about their efforts to sort of subvert the ownership considerations of the Sinking City, and they just wanted to take the rights for themselves. For example, the Frogwares logo was removed from some of the PS4 and Xbox One game covers and other marketing materials, and the developers were only mentioned on the reverse side with the technical partners, again creating a perception that Frogwares were neither the authors nor the owners of the game. Furthermore, we were surprised to find out the copyright notices on box cover and storefront pages were legally incorrect, creating a perception that Frogwares was not the owner of the IP. A tabletop version of the Sinking City RPG was created without informing the developers, the owners of the IP, and was distributed freely, selling it freely without notifying Frogwares at all. And when launching Nacon on the public market, the official stock market prospectus suggested that the intellectual property of the Sinking City was owned by BBI/Nacon, while again, the Sinking City was actually owned by Frogwares. As you see here, they list the Sinking City along with all of the other franchises that they hold in their portfolio, heavily implying that they own the rights to it. And again, you don't see Frogwares listed here. They just completely ignore it and pretend as though they own it. It's weird. They finish this out with a statement saying, to developers and people of the industry, if you want to talk about this, reach out. We will try to answer you as much as we can so that you won't end up in similar situations. It's a shame that in such a creative industry, there is so much energy wasted because of such practices. That's why we decided to write this open letter. We hope that this transparency will help everyone to be aware of what is really going on behind the scenes. We only have one goal, helping to banish bad practices by speaking freely about them, instead of remaining subject to the code of silence. We know that we are not the only ones in this situation. This is our way to help the video game industry become more ethical. Okay, we got through all of that. Time for a Sprite break. Opening it much more slowly this time. Okay, something about a cold Sprite. It just hits different. Love it! So all of this started working its way through the court system slowly but surely over in France. And all of this was complicated by COVID, of course, because basically everything was complicated by COVID. And you see, one of the special exceptions that a lot of national governments made during the coronavirus lockdowns were that certain contracts couldn't just be canceled and voided randomly in the middle of lockdowns. And the reason that they put these restrictions in place to sort of keep contracts together was because they didn't want thousands of leases being broken. They didn't want thousands of contracts for manufacturing goods to go completely unfilled and unpaid. They wanted to keep the economy somewhat held together. So they said, okay, you can't cancel everything. You gotta keep things sort of ready to go on the burner. So once we reopen the economy, we can get rolling again. I mean, again, at that time, back in early 2020, most people thought that COVID would be over and done with by like the summer. I remember talking to a friend of mine who's a doctor, and she was like, yeah, no, my guess would be that probably July, August, this will all be behind us. It's hilarious to think of now, but that's what we thought at the time. But some of these actions by Frogwares started to look as though they might be violating some of these restrictions and guidelines, specifically removing the game from all of these storefronts looked as though it effectively was tantamount to terminating those contracts in the middle of the pandemic, which offered all sorts of big legal question marks. Nobody was really sure if this was actually allowed or if it was something that was going to be forbidden in the courts. So it was a bit of a gamble for them to do this. But the reason they took the game off of all of these storefronts was because they didn't want Nacon, Big Ben Interactive, to continue profiting off of their title. They claimed that the publishers were just selling their game, not paying royalties, not paying profits out, and they had basically stolen the game. And so they just wanted to deal with it and end that profit from them. So they just said, screw it, we'll take it off of everything. Nobody gets the game. If you aren't going to play nice, nobody gets it. And this would end up being a bit of a blunder on their part, because when this eventually got into the court system, the French courts were not that big of fans of this move. You see, in the first decision that was put out by the Paris Court of Appeal back in October of 2020, just a few months after that initial filing was done, they ruled that by removing the game, Frogwares had, quote, terminated its contract in a manifestly unlawful manner. They went on to say that the contract must be continued until a decision has been made on whether Nacon breached its agreement, as Frogwares alleges. The developer has been ordered to refrain from any further action that would affect this contract. So, okay, late October 2020, they're told very clearly by the Court of Appeal, not to mess with the contract anymore, to leave the games up until the courts have decided what actually is going on. Pretty clear. Don't mess with anything. What did they do? They filed a DMCA against their own game. Yeah, so in March of 2021, they looked on Steam and found that the publisher, Nacon, had actually uploaded a version of The Sinking City that was hacked, effectively a pirated version of the game, and they started selling it on Steam, taking all of the proceeds without the permission or consent of Frogwares. And so, in order to deal with this, instead of just letting it work through the courts again, like the courts wanted, they went and filed a DMCA takedown against their own game. Now, Frogwares and Nacon both responded to a Vice representative on this particular story with, in this case, Frogwares saying, quote, "Regarding our use of DMCA to remove the game from Steam, we believe in a very short time we were able to collect extremely strong evidence to indicate this version of the game was pirated and contains content that Nacon has absolutely no rights to, namely the Merciful Madness DLC. A DMCA notice proved to be our most effective tool to give us time to gain further potential evidence and to start the required and lengthy additional legal processes to prevent this from happening again. We are aware that a final ruling on whether Frogwares are obligated to deliver a Steam version has not yet been made and could take years. As it stands, we have an appeals court ruling saying, until further notice, Frogwares do not need to deliver a Steam version to Nacon. In the meantime, Nacon decided to take justice into their own hands and release a pirated build. We are also aware that the DMCA claim on this Steam version may only be a temporary fix and that the game may make a comeback, in this form or another, providing partners like Valve with finalized rulings and third-party verified evidence so they can make their final decision takes time and resources. If in the meantime they decide that they have to continue selling the game, we can only respect that while continuing to speak to them and provide them with more information." Put simply, they found evidence that was pretty clear to them that this version of the game was pirated and that Nacon was selling it on Steam in breach of the ruling from the appeals court just because they could and they wanted the revenue from it. And so they filed the DMCA claim to get it taken down. Again, sort of taking the law into their own hands, but what are you going to do? Now, Nacon said in response that they had, quote, "repeatedly and unsuccessfully requested that Frogwares make the game available on Steam, failing which it would apply a clause in the contract where in such a case the game would be adapted by a third party," end quote. Nacon essentially confirmed what Frogwares was accusing, but claims it was within contractual rights. In other words, they admitted that it was not a legitimate copy of the game, that it was basically a pirated version that they had adapted, but that it was okay because a clause in the contract made it okay. It's so bizarre. Like, what is happening? Now, if you're like me, you're probably looking at this with sort of skeptical hippo eyes. You're probably like, okay, what is going on? Like, how bad is this contract? How vague is it? Is everybody wondering what's going on? Like, no contract can possibly be this vague. Or one of the parties is just totally full of it. Or some combination thereof. But something weird is going on. And the thing to understand is that this is not the first time that Frogwares has been involved in contractual disputes with publishers, okay? They've done this actually a lot. So it could be that they just don't tolerate publishers pushing them around, or it's that they have a history of sort of misunderstanding contracts or of writing convoluted contracts that can be abused by publishers. It's really confusing, but like in this case, you see that in 2002, the distribution of the game Sherlock Holmes: The Mystery of the Mummy was made by intermediaries who did not pay the studio honestly, and as a result, Frogwares filed a bunch of lawsuits against them. Furthermore, they were licensed with Focus Home Interactive as a licensee from 2004 to 2005 and from 2014 to 2015 and beyond. And in 2019, Frogwares claimed that Focus Home Interactive was not the publisher of the Sherlock Holmes games, but a distribution intermediary that did not participate in the financing of the games. The relationship between the two companies ended in a dispute in the fall of 2019 when Focus Home Interactive's license ended, and the situation resulted in the temporary withdrawal of most Frogwares games from multiple large platforms like Steam and Epic, and I don't think that actually, just Steam and Xbox, PlayStation, those places. And the development studio, who have the sole rights to the games, had to initiate all sorts of new certifications. That eventually got the games back up in 2020. So they have a history of running into problems with publishers. But the big question in my mind is whether or not this is just a Frogwares issue, that they've done this repeatedly, or if most other development studios have run into this type of thing and just don't publicly talk about it anywhere near as much, because I'm sure this type of thing happens a lot elsewhere in the industry. I just personally haven't seen another development studio that makes it so public that they're posting like big blog pieces about it, and they talk about it super publicly. Normally, companies don't air their dirty laundry like that, but Frogwares does. I mean, there was another case, in this case, this company, Atomic, I think is how it's pronounced. Atomic, maybe, is what it's, I really don't know. I've never heard of it. But what they said is that on their platform, they were selling The Sinking City, and instead of just filing the claims, because guess what? Atomic, or Utomic, whatever it is, they don't actually legally have the right to sell the game. So they took a pirated version of the game off of Pirate Bay or something, and they started selling that for $30, $40, and just pocketing the cash. And instead of filing the paperwork, the developers, Frogwares, actually hopped on Twitter and responded directly to them. Hello, Utomic. Who gave you the rights to sell our game, The Sinking City? Not us. And it can only be us, since it is our game, our marks, our marketing assets, our work. Please contact us ASAP. And then they went on. Hi, Frogwares, definitely need to discuss this. I agree. Can you follow back so we can discuss this in a DM? Thanks. Like, totally... like, oh, I'm blown away. I can't believe, yeah, total misunderstanding, right? We just accidentally started selling a pirated version of your game. Oopsie. You can't make this stuff up. So, okay, that's the scene set. Let's talk about it. Let's huddle up. Come on. So all of this is still working its way through the court system. Don't think that this is settled. This is all very much still alleged. Nothing's been decided by the courts either which way definitively. So we don't really know who to believe or who is completely right. What it seems is going on, though, regardless, Frogwares gets into this trouble relatively frequently compared to what other studios of their same size have run into. And so it seems as though they could perhaps benefit from heavy investments in better contract lawyers who look over these things before they're signed. That would be my suggestion. I mean, all joking aside, it's just like whenever you're dealing with this type of thing, not just in the video game space, but like in the business world and even in your personal life, if you have something going on in the legal system, don't talk about it. Like, don't air your dirty laundry because you get nothing for it. Like, if they had just gone and filed the paperwork for this lawsuit and moved about their business, they would have been totally fine. They wouldn't have gotten an appeals court decision against them. They would have been sitting pretty well going into this next phase of the rulings process. But now they look as though they are, in effect, a troublemaker to the court, and that just never works out. You want the court to have every reason to side with you and to think that you are playing by the book. You don't want the court to be like, oh, these guys, like, they've broken multiple rulings, they filed DMCA takedowns, breached their own contract because they think that the other guy breached it. Like, it just doesn't work. It doesn't work. Just, like, don't talk about it. Shut up and just do your thing. It's not worth it. But I do think all of this brings up a very important point, which is that small development studios don't have the resources usually to fight huge publishers like this. Normally, if they get taken for a ride by Nacon, Focus On, whoever they might be sort of taking advantage of, they normally wouldn't have the resources to deal with it. They would just have to kind of suck it up because they're reliant on the publisher that they are in a dispute with to pay their salaries and to pay for their mortgages and to put food on their families' plates. Like, it's really difficult to fight that, right? So I can absolutely understand why this type of abuse by big publishers could happen pretty frequently with smaller development studios. And it's just unfortunate that it seems to be pretty common. One of the best things that's happened in recent memory is with Steam and even with Game Pass. Small studios are able to self-publish games more easily than ever before. And that is a very good thing because it means that those small dev teams can just totally bypass all of this garbage, and that's good to see. And say what you will about Epic Games, Epic Games is actually one of the best partners for some of these AA and single A studios. AAA studios have enough cash on hand that they can fund the development of their own stuff, usually by themselves. They don't need to go to outside partners for help. But for these smaller studios, they usually need a bit of extra cash, so they go to publishers and they go to these other companies that might take them for a ride or try to take advantage of the situation to help with development on another project that they're working on or whatever else it might be. Epic Games, they do guarantee usually flat sums of money based on whatever the game is. So they can effectively guarantee a return for the developers, and that is a huge deal. From what I've been told, it's similar to a lot of Game Pass contracts, which guarantee certain returns for games if you can deliver it onto the platform exclusively on time. But all of that said, I wish Frogwares the best of luck in their legal proceedings. All of the stuff they've said, I think, is probably pretty accurate. I have no reason to believe that they're making up some of the things that they're mentioning, like the pirated copy of the game that the publisher basically agrees is pirated, but they say it's okay. Like stuff like that that's just weird and bizarre. I think I'm leaning into Frogwares a little bit more, but I'm always open to having my mind changed by evidence. So who knows, maybe Nacon will surprise me. As of right now, I'm not particularly sold. But you know what? It's just another case of the gaming industry being bizarre and interesting all at the same time. That's it for me. Thank you for watching. I appreciate you. If you enjoyed the video, hit that like button. It actually really does help me figure out what videos you guys enjoy and what you want to see more of. If you have a story you'd like me to